Hello everyone, this is Rick. Welcome to an episode on modern India. And today we are going to discuss about Government of India Act 1935. And along with that, we are also going to go through the Congress and the other ministries which happened as a result of Government of India Act. This video is tailored according to the syllabus of ISC board, so it is in very much detail. However, if you are from any other board or if you are in need of this topic, if you need to know in detail about the Government of India Act, you can surely go through this video. And this video is made in points. The whole presentation is based on points, and these points will give you detailed ideas about the topic along with major datas and facts. So without doing any delay, let's begin. Government of India Act 1935. Please carry a notebook with you while you see this video so that you can note down the important points. So, Government of India Act 1935. Key features. What are the main features of Government of India Act? Enactment and purpose. It was passed as a result of discussions from the Third Roundtable Conference in 1932. So in 1932, there was a roundtable conference in London, which was attended by our own Mahatma Gandhi. And there, Mahatma Gandhi was insulted as an half naked fakir. However, he came back, and it was the time of civil disobedience movement. But in that roundtable conference, a discussion was done regarding the Government of India Act. So it started because it aimed to provide autonomy to British Indian provinces and establish a federation of India with both British and Indian provinces along with princely states. So the Federation of India will be established according to Government of India Act 1935, and in that Federation of India there will be three entities of power, that is the British Empire, British Indian provinces, and the princely states. Ministers in the provinces controlled administration and were responsible to be elected to the elected legislature. So there will be a legislature, and the whole country of undivided India will be divided into different provinces, and ministers will be elected from those provinces who will be members of the legislature. Governor, however, had special executive powers concerning bills, and they appointed and dismissed ministers at their discretion. So, governor will be there, just like today you have different states, and in those different states, you form those different states, you have your members of parliament. Similar kind of elections should be held. However, there will be a governor at the head of everything, and that governor can elect or dismiss ministers. Federal structure means the country or the territory will be divided into different regions, and those regions will have their own government. The federal government was to include a governor general and a council of ministers. The federal legislature was bicameral, comprising the council of states and house of assembly. So the legislature was bicameral, means there will be two houses. Even now the Parliament of India is bicameral, just like we have Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Before independence, according to the Government of India Act, there was to be a council of states and also house of assembly. So the structure was federal, there was bicameral legislature, and the two houses in that bicameral legislature were council of states and house of assembly. Elections and representation. Members of the provincial legislative assemblies were to be elected directly by the people. Just like now, there were votes, and the members of the provincial legislative assemblies were to be elected directly. However, the franchise was limited based on property qualifications. So, the person who is standing for election, that person will have to have a limited amount of property, and the system of separate electorates was retained. Electorates means voter list. So there were to be separate electorates, means separate voter lists, and that system was there from the beginning only, and that was to be retained. Reserved departments. The government retained control over key departments like foreign affairs, defense, which were not under elected representatives. This central control was the key reason why Congress rejected the act. So, even though Indians were given autonomy through elected representatives in certain fields, but the main affairs of the government, like foreign affairs and defense, rested in the British Empire. And who will control it? The Governor General, who is the head of British Empire in India. The Governor General will control the key departments like foreign affairs and defense. So this is the main reason why Congress later on rejected this Government of India Act. Reaction and implementation. Congress and Muslim League opposed the act for different reasons. Both Congress and Muslim League, the two major political parties at that point of time, both of them rejected the act. The Congress condemned it but participated in 1937 elections under protest. So even though the Congress did not like the act completely, they condemned it but still participated in the elections of 1937. The federal part was never implemented, means dividing India into provinces and each of the provinces having their own government. That part was not implemented, and it was not implemented because of the princely states. I will come to that later, but the provincial autonomy provisions were enforced. So whole of the Government of India Act was not implemented, but after the elections of 1937, except the federal structure, all other things were more or less implemented. Now let's proceed. 1937 elections under the Government of India Act. What happened in the elections of 1937? Electoral outcome. What was the result? The 1937 elections were held under the new act. Congress emerged as the dominant party in the polls, securing a majority in multiple provinces. So, whole of the India, and here India, when I am talking about India, I mean the undivided India before independence. So, whole of India was divided into provinces. There were 11 main provinces, and Congress emerged as the dominant party in almost all the provinces. Congress performance. Congress contested in 710 seats and won 707 of them. They swept through general Hindu seats because Congress had a lot of Hindu support. So they own over all the major Hindu seats, own 38 out of 48 reserved seats for Labour. So 48 seats were reserved for Labour, and among those 48, Congress owned 38 of them, secured 18 out of 26 reserved seats for Dalits. Dalits mean lower caste Hindus. So 26 seats were reserved for the Dalits, and Congress owned 18 among those 26 seats. Performance in major provinces. UP. What happened in Uttar Pradesh? Congress contested 88 seats, own 86 seats. So out of 88 seats in Uttar Pradesh, Congress own 86 of them. CP means in Central Province, which is approximately the area of Madhya Pradesh. So in Central Province there were 75 seats. Congress own 70 among 75. In Bihar, there were 152 seats. Congress won in 95 of them. Madras, there were 159 seats. Congress won all the seats in Madras province. In Bombay, there were 117 seats. Congress won all of them. In Bengal, again, Congress won 250 seats. Punjab was a place where Congress performed poorly due to strong unionist party presence. Now we will see how was the performance of the Muslim League. Muslim League had a comparatively weak performance except in Muslim majority areas. So areas where the population was majority Muslims, in those areas Muslim League had good performance. Other than that, they performed very poorly. So they secured 19 seats in NWFP. NWFP means Northwest Frontier Province. It was in the northwest part of undivided India, and there also Congress dominated. Now, how was the government formed? There were total 11 provinces. Whole of undivided India had 11 provinces, and Congress formed ministries in 7 out of 11 provinces. Means in 7 provinces they had complete majority. Coalition governments were formed in some provinces where Congress did not have a majority. So coalition government means forming government with the help of a group of political parties. So Congress, by being in addition with other political parties, gained majority, and thus coalition governments were formed. Congress initially hesitated to form government but later agreed after negotiations. So, as we know that Congress condemned the Government of India Act of 1935, therefore initially there were problems. Congress hesitated to form any kind of government, but later on Congress agreed after negotiations with the British Empire and also negotiations with other parties. So, significance this for the first time election was there in the Indian subcontinent, proper election, and Congress actively participated in governance under British rule. This showed that Congress's electoral strength and public support was very much prevalent. So, for the first time, we got to understand that Congress actually had electoral strength and the public loved Congress. Now we will see what were the challenges faced by the Congress ministries. Conditional acceptance. Congress accepted office under the condition that governors would not use their special powers to interfere in the functioning of ministries. So, this was a provincial government, means it was a partial powerful government. Congress did not have all the power. However, Congress accepted to form ministries under the condition that the British government, especially the governors who were the representatives of the British government, they will not use their special powers to interfere in the functioning of the ministries. High expectations. Congress faced immense pressure as people had high hopes for reforms and improvements in governance. So the people for the first time sent their own representatives to the parliament. Hence, the general public of India thought that now, since we have our own people in the parliament, that's why every problem will be sorted very easily. So, Congress had to face immense pressure of high expectations from the general public of India. Limited powers. So, even though Congress formed governments in several provinces, they had to operate under the authority of governor generals. That is why they did not have complete freedom. So, their powers were very much limited. Introduction of reforms. Despite constraints, Congress ministries implemented numerous reforms aimed at improving the socio-economic conditions of the masses. So there were different restrictions provided by the British Empire, so Congress ministries couldn't function as independently as it should have. Even though with all these challenges, they managed to give some kind of improving developmental socio-economic condition to the people. Political and administrative challenges. Congress had to navigate through the complexities of British administration while maintaining public trust and governance efficiency. So, Congress had to negotiate. The people of India wanted much from the Congress, whereas the Britishers did not want to give anything to the Congress. So, Congress had to choose a middle path, and so it had to navigate through the complexities of British administration, which was relatively new system for the Indian parliamentary representative body. Now, activities and reforms of the Congress ministries. What kind of reforms did the Congress ministries do at the time of the Government of India Act, and the ministry stayed for 2 years in power, that is from 1937 to 1939. So, political prisoners released. The first thing that the Congress ministries did were the political prisoners, means the people who were arrested because of having differences in political opinion with the British Empire, and among them 1100 prisoners were released in Bengal alone, and also in UP Kakori prisoners were released. Political exiles. Exile means sometimes a few people were very much politically powerful, and those people caused problem for the British Empire, hence they were sent into exile, means they were not allowed to participate in any kind of social or political activities. So Congress made efforts to lift restrictions on leaders like Ras Bihari Bose. This person, Ras Bihari Bose, founded INA, Indian National Army, which was later on handed to Subhash Chandra Bose, who did miracles with the power of Indian National Army. Along with Ras Bihari Bose, there were people like Prithvi Singh, Abani Mukherjee, but those imprisoned in Andaman jails remained detained. So even though they could free few important political figures from exile, but still the people who were in cellular jail in Andaman and Nicobar, in Andaman, they were still remaining there. They couldn't be freed. Restoration of political rights. Different political parties were banned because they criticized the British Empire. So, those bans were lifted from political parties and similar organizations. Next, we have press freedoms. Newspapers were granted the right to criticize government freely. So, different newspapers they could not publish anything, and they were censored. So those sensory liftments were carried out, and they had the right to criticize the government as per their analysis. Peasant relief measures. In Madras, Congress ministry remitted peasants pending loans. So all the agricultural loans were lifted off in the Madras province. In Bombay and UP, the interest on agricultural loans were reduced. Industrial reforms. In 1938, Bombay passed the Industrial Dispute Act. So, this was a law passed in Bombay in the year 1938, which increased the wages of mill workers. So, that was an industrial reform carried out by the Congress ministries. Social reforms. Restrictions were placed on sale of intoxicating drugs, means drugs or objects which were harmful for the people, they were not sold, and restrictions were placed on the sale of those products. Agricultural reforms. In Madras and UP, the tenancy legislation was introduced to protect peasants from landlord exploitations. So, landlords at that point of time exploited the peasants in the form of taking money for tenancy. So those tenancy legislations were made which protected the peasants from landlord exploitation. Economic reforms. Steps were taken to prevent exploitations by moneylenders and improve irrigation facilities. So, these were the economic reforms. Moneylenders could not ask for whatever they want, and there were a few set of laws in which the money lending business could function. And also, different irrigation facilities were given to agricultural lands so that farming was smooth. Impact. These reforms led to massive public support for Congress among the rural population. So, Congress was mainly reserved for the elite class of people, but after these reforms, Congress gained a lot of support from the rural population. Now, laws passed for workers and major achievements. What were the laws passed for the workers, and how were those laws a major achievement for the Congress? Labor reforms. October 1937, Congress established a labor committee that framed pro worker policies accepted by all India Congress Committee. So, among the working of the Congress, a separate section was established called Labor Committee, who will function for the benefit of workers in India. The key worker protections. What were the key laws that were made by the labor committee? So, holiday with pay. Before this, before the enaction of these laws, all the holidays were without pay. So, that was corrected. Then, live with pay during sickness. People, when they were sick, they could take leave, and it was paid leave. Employment insurance means if something happens to the worker, then the organization will ensure that the employee is taken well care of. So, minimum wage fixation. There was a minimum amount of wage which was compulsory to be paid to the workers. Recognition of trade unions. Workers could form unions and they were legal. So, industrial dispute bill, it happened in Bombay and it was passed to prevent strikes and lockdowns, but faced opposition from labor groups. So, sometimes the labor groups resorted to strike and lockdown to protest against their owners. So, this was prevented. It was decided that there will be no more strikes and lockouts. But the labor groups opposed to this law. Jute mill and Tisco strikes. Workers in Kanpur and Jamshedpur protested against low wages and poor conditions. So, the workers in Kanpur and Jamshedpur who were working for jute mill and Tisco, means Tata Iron Steel Corporation organization, which was in Jamshedpur. So the workers of these organizations protested against the owners for low wages and poor living conditions. Congress initially mediated but later suppressed with some movements with police intervention. So sometimes Congress used to solve all these things through negotiations. However, later on, sometimes they also had to take the help of police. Education and cultural reforms. Wardha Conference. What happened in Wardha Conference? They advocated free and compulsory education in mother tongue. So education will be given and it will be absolutely free, and also it will be in mother tongue so that people can understand what is the material of education. Vocational training means introduction of skill based education, skill based training to create more efficient workers. Welfare schemes. Congress launched tribal welfare programs. Tribal people were very much neglected, so Congress did something for them also. They reduced the salaries of ministers and focused on jail reforms. So, in those times, the jail people, the prisoners, were mainly political workers who protested against the British Empire. So, jail reforms were done so that those prisoners would have a healthy lifestyle which would provide them with proper corrections needed. Declaration of Fundamental Rights. Congress ministries emphasized civil liberties and fundamental rights, setting the groundwork for future constitutional developments. Assessment of Congress ministries and resignation. So, how did the Congress ministries perform and why did they resign? Assessment of reforms. Congress ministries made reforms to introduce administrative and social reforms but failed to implement significant land reforms. So, all of their reforms were mainly in support of administration and social corrections, but they could not do anything significant in the context of land reforms. Criticism by Marxist writers. They pointed out that zamindars and landed aristocracy retained power as Congress hesitated to challenge them. Now, here is the irony. Most of the rich people were members of Congress themselves. And how did they become rich? They became rich by being zamindars or landlords. So, Congress did very little to offend the zamindars and landed aristocracy. Hence, they retained power. Influence of the landed class. Congress had a stronghold in rural areas, yet in provinces like UP, the majority of talukdars were Muslim, and any reform could alienate them. So, Congress had a Muslim appeasement policy up to some extent at that time. Therefore, since the majority of talukdars in UP were Muslim, Congress did not do anything to go against them. This led to Congress relying on landlords despite their intent to cooperate with all sections. So the members of Congress were forced to rely on the landlords. Congress ministries resigned in protest against the British involvement in World War II without consulting Indian leaders. So the Indians, along with the Britishers, here Britishers got involved in World War II. That means 50% of British army were Indian people. 50 or roughly 50%. So Indians will also have to fight war on behalf of the Britishers. And Britishers decided this without consulting the Congress members. Hence, in World War II, the Britishers, without consulting the Indians, decided that the poor Indian people will fight for the Britishers and they will die for the Britishers. This was not liked by the Congress, hence the resignation. The resignation left provincial governments in limbo and weakened the presence of elected Indian leaders in the governance. So, with the resignation of the Congress ministers, there was no national representation of people in the parliament and also in the governance. The resignation deepened the rift between Congress and the British government. So, with the resignation, the Congress and the British government were totally against each other. It also provided an opportunity for the Muslim League to expand its influence as Congress ministries had ended their rule. So the ground was left blank and Muslim League took advantage of this situation to show seeds of communalism among Indian people. Now we will go through the question and answers. So we will start with the 4 marks question. What was the main change introduced by the Government of India Act 1935 at the provincial level? Provincial autonomy. The act introduced provincial autonomy, transferring significant powers from the British governor to elected Indian ministers. Elected ministries. Ministries were directly responsible to the provincial legislatures, reducing British administrative control. Governor's powers. Though the governor retained special powers, most day to day governance was handled by Indian ministers. End of diarchy. The system of diarchy, which had been introduced by the Government of India Act 1919, was abolished. State any one provision of the Government of India Act 1935. Here, not only one, for your information, for your easiness, I will list more than one provisions. So, bicameral legislature. The act introduced a bicameral legislature at the center consisting of the Federal Assembly and the Council of States. Provincial autonomy. It provided autonomy to provinces by making ministers accountable to elected legislatures. Reserved subjects. The Governor General retained control over key areas like defense and foreign affairs. Franchise based on property. The right to vote was still restricted to individuals meeting specific property qualifications. Why did the federal scheme introduced by the Government of India Act 1935 never come into operation? Princely states opposition. The Federation of India proposed under the Act required princely states to join, but many refused. Congress rejection. Congress opposed the Act as it did not grant full independence. Governor General's powers. The Governor General retained overriding powers, making Indian ministers ineffective. World War II. The outbreak of World War II in 1939 shifted British priorities, preventing the full implementation of the scheme. What was the meaning of conditional acceptance of office? Congress decision. Congress accepted office in 1937 under the condition that British governors would not interfere in governance. Governors' assurances. The governors assured Congress that they would not misuse their special powers. Limited authority. Congress agreed to function despite restrictions as full autonomy was not granted. Political strategy. The decision allowed Congress to implement reforms while continuing to demand complete independence. Mention two provinces where non Congress ministries were formed in 1937. I will list more than two provinces. Bengal. The Krishak Praja Party, led by Fajlul Haq, formed a ministry with the Muslim League. Punjab, the Unionist Party under Sir Sikandar Hayat Khan led the provincial government. Sindh, a non-Congress government, was led by Ghulam Hussain Hidayatullah. Assam, non-Congress parties held power with Gopinath Bardoli playing a key role. What was the fate of the tenancy bill in UP? Proposed by Congress, the Congress government in Uttar Pradesh introduced the tenancy bill to protect peasants from exploitation. Opposition from talukdars. The bill faced stiff resistance from talukdars landlords who were influential in rural areas. Congress compromise. To avoid alienating landlords, Congress did not push for immediate implementation. Failure to pass. Due to political opposition, the bill was never fully enacted, disappointing peasants. What was the Industrial Dispute Bill? Introduced in 1938, the Bombay Ministry passed the Industrial Dispute Bill to regulate labor relations. Wage reforms. It sought to increase wages of mill workers and improve their working conditions. Strike prevention. The bill aimed to reduce strikes and lockouts, favoring dispute resolution through arbitration. Workers' opposition. Some workers protested, fearing that the bill favored industrialists, leading to tensions. In which provinces did Congress emerge as the single largest party? United Provinces. Congress won 86 out of 88 contested seats. Bihar. Congress secured 95 out of 152 seats. Madras. Congress owned 159 seats, forming the largest legislative group. Bombay. Congress secured a majority with 117 seats. Which Congress leaders worked as arbitrators between the workers and TISCO authority? Rajendra Prasad played a key role in mediating between TISCO workers and management. Subhash Chandra Bose initially supported workers' rights but later distanced himself due to Congress's stance. Vallabhbhai Patel advocated for labor rights within the framework of industrial peace. Outcome. Despite efforts, industrial disputes remained a major concern for workers. Why did the Congress ministries resign in 1939? World War II issue. Britain dragged India into World War II without consulting Indian leaders. Protest against British rule. Congress saw this as another instance of colonial oppression. Demand for full independence. Congress demanded complete self rule rather than partial autonomy. Resignation as protest. All Congress led provincial ministers resigned, creating a political vacuum. Now we will discuss the long answer type questions which may come from this portion of ISC syllabus. So before going into the detailed answers, let us go through answer writing strategies. Proper structure, and that means it will have introduction, main points, and also conclusion. It should be a balanced perspective, means achievements and failures should be listed. Data oriented approach means facts, acts, and policies will have to be noted while you are writing long answers. So, what were the main features of the Government of India Act 1935? Introduction. In introduction, we can write that The Government of India Act 1935 was the longest and most comprehensive legislation passed by the British Parliament for governing India. It aimed at decentralizing power by granting autonomy to provinces while maintaining British control over key areas. Main features: Provincial autonomy. Provincial ministers were made responsible to elected legislatures. Governors retained discretionary powers but had to act on the advice of ministers. Bicameral federal legislature proposed a two-house legislature at the center, Federal Assembly and Council of States. The Governor General held overriding powers in key areas. Federation of India suggested a federation of British India and princely states. The scheme never materialized as princely states refused to join. Reserved and transferred subjects. Some departments like Foreign Affairs and Defense were reserved under British control. Other areas such as education and local governance were transferred to Indian ministers. Extension of franchise. The electorate expanded from 7 million to 35 million voters. Voting rights were still based on property qualifications. Abolition of diarchy in provinces. Introduced by the 1919 Act, diarchy was removed, giving more autonomy to provincial governments. However, diarchy was introduced at the centre, increasing British control. Establishment of federal court. A federal court was set up to resolve disputes between the British government provinces and princely states. Communal representation. The Act continued a system of separate electorates which further divided communities based on religion. In conclusion, we can write the Government of India Act 1935 was a significant step towards self governance, but it fell short of granting complete independence. While it introduced autonomy in provinces, the central government remained under British control. Its failure led to increased demands for complete independence, culminating in the Quit India movement of 1942. Give a critical estimate of the working of Congress ministries in the years 1937 to 39 in the provinces. In introduction, we can write after the 1937 elections, the Indian National Congress formed ministries in 7 out of 11 provinces. Despite constraints, Congress attempted to introduce reforms in various sectors. Achievements of Congress ministries: civil liberties and political reforms. Congress prisoners, including Kakori conspirators, were released. Press censorship was lifted, the right to criticize the government was granted. Agricultural reforms, tenancy acts were introduced in UP and Bengal to improve peasants' conditions. Efforts were made to abolish landlord exploitation, but Congress faced resistance from talukdars. Labor welfare. Bombay Ministry 1938 passed the Industrial Dispute Act, increasing wages for mill workers. Strikes and labor movements such as the Tisco and jute mill strikes gained momentum. Social reforms. The sale of intoxicating drugs was restricted. Primary education was promoted and vocational training was introduced in many provinces. Reduction in government expenses. Ministers voluntarily reduced their salaries. Jail reforms were introduced to improve prisoners' conditions. Failures and criticism. Limited implementation of land reforms. Despite promises, Congress failed to abolish zamindari and protect peasants fully. Fear of alienating landlords weakened Congress's agrarian policies. Labor unrest and industrial conflicts. Congress attempted to regulate labor strikes, leading to workers' dissatisfaction. The Tisco strike in Jamshedpur was suppressed with police force. British interference and governors' powers. Governors retained discretionary powers limiting Congress's control over governance. The Governor General could override decisions, frustrating Congress leaders. Communal politics and Muslim League opposition. The Muslim League accused Congress of anti Muslim policies, increasing communal tensions. Bengal and Punjab saw the rise of non Congress ministries, weakening national unity. Resignation of Congress Ministries 1939. In November 1939, Congress Ministries resigned in protest against British involvement in World War II without consulting Indian leaders. This move left a political vacuum, allowing the Muslim League to expand its influence, particularly through Jinnah's demand for Pakistan. So that was all in this video. This video is tailored according to the ISC syllabus, but anyone interested in the topic, anyone who needs detailed information regarding this topic can go through this video. The question answers will not only be useful in your exams, but it will help you to understand the topic better. Thank you so much for your love and support.